Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ice-Burgh To Go, your daily dose of Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts from. Today, I want to talk a little bit about former Penguins first round pick Owen Pickering, because while yes, Kyle Dubas has bolstered up the Penguins prospect system well in his less than a year as president of hockey operations and general manager, between the names he has brought in and then also the general development of the names that were already in the system. Guys like Tristan Brose, guys like a Jack St. Ivany, for example. But there is still one area that is in dire need of an upgrade, and that is defense. Owen Pickering is the top and really the only grade A or B prospect for the Penguins right now. I mean, Jack St. Ivany, like I mentioned earlier, he took steps forward this year. Looks like he could potentially be a guy that they turn to from day one of next season for the right side, the third pairing. And that's great. It was a diamond in the rough find. It was a diamond in the rough development this year from Jack St. Ivany. But outside of St. Ivany and Pickering, there's really nobody there. So a lot rides on Owen Pickering when it comes to the Penguins looking to go younger on their defense core. Pickering is the Penguins' 2022 first-round pick. He had 46 points in 59 games for the Swift Current Broncos of the WHL, getting them back into the postseason as their captain for the second consecutive season. Now, the Penguins, they have a tough decision to make when it pertains to Owen Pickering next season. They could either send him back to the WHL for one final season. He's 20 years old at the moment, doesn't turn 21 until after December 31st, so he can play really in all three leagues. He can play at the NHL level, although I wouldn't expect him to be ready specifically at the jump starting next season, or he could play at the AHL level because he's over the age of 20, or the WHL level because he has that 1 year of eligibility left. And that's the decision that awaits the Penguins at the end of this summer. You look at Pickering's frame, and that has been the biggest thing that people mention whenever they look at the Penguins' defensive prospect. He is 6'5" and 185 pounds, growing an inch since the Penguins drafted him about 2 years ago and gaining a little bit of weight last offseason. I read a really good piece by Scott Wheeler of The Athletic talking about Owen Pickering's struggles over the last couple of seasons, dealing with injuries in the summer, dealing with the World Junior snub this past season. But in that piece, a couple of interesting little tidbits about Owen Pickering. One, he gained 14 pounds last offseason despite dealing with an ankle injury. As you might remember, he hasn't participated in either training camp since he's been drafted by the Penguins. First one he missed due to a wrist injury. Last year he missed due to an ankle injury, but he still gained 14 pounds throughout the offseason. And that's going to be the biggest thing going into this summer. Not only does he need to gain that weight again, because if he's able to have similar weight gain this year, he'll be up around 200 pounds, which puts him closer to being NHL ready as far as a body weight and size standpoint. But he also needs to stay healthy. You know, he missed those two training camps. He hasn't really had an opportunity to go to, prospect development camp, rookie camp up in Buffalo if they do participate this year. It'd be nice to see him grow through that and see where he's at compared to some of the other Penguins prospects, because last year that was the first look we had at Braden Yeager, and he looked far and away to be one of the best, if not the best players on the ice every time he stepped on the ice. If Pickering gets that same chance and he looks the same way, a lot of eyes are going to be opened throughout the summer, and it's going to go a long way into determining whether or not the Penguins want to bring him to the AHL level and make him turn pro and get him started on that first year of the ELC, or if they feel like he needs to grow a little bit more at the WHL level. But here's the big thing for Pickering. The Penguins have some massive questions on the left side. Now, should that play a factor into how quickly they develop him and how quickly they try to move him along? No, it shouldn't. But there is going to be opportunity for Owen Pickering at the NHL level sooner rather than later. You look at the left side, there's question marks surrounding every left shot defenseman within this organization. Marcus Pettersson, there might not be questions about his play, but he is entering a contract year. Now, some believe that right after Sidney Crosby gets done that maybe Marcus Pettersson gets a contract extension this offseason. He certainly has deserved it. Now, he can't get that until July 1st, whenever the new league year begins, but there are some that believe that he is deserving and he will get a contract extension soon after July 1st. That would be great. I think the Penguins locking down Marcus Pettersson longer term, getting him through the remainder of his, best seasons, I think would be a good thing for the Penguins. But as we stand here today, while there isn't question about his play, there is question about his future. He doesn't have a contract beyond next season, so there's a little bit of a question mark there. But behind that, the question marks get very, very big. Ryan Graves is coming off of a worst case scenario season. He has 5 years left on that deal. The Penguins seem to be locked into that. The Penguins seem to be eager to let him bounce back in his second season. That's still a major question mark. Now, is it going to be as bad as year one? It would be hard for Ryan Graves to be as bad as he was throughout the majority of his first season in Pittsburgh. Though that's still a huge question mark as to whether or not he can bounce back. And if he doesn't, do the Penguins try to get rid of that contract as early as next season or even as early as this summer? Have they been using general manager speak to just try to keep his trade value somewhere above nothing, somewhere above unmovable? So there's a huge question in Ryan Graves. Then there's P.O. Joseph. What is he at the National Hockey League level? Is he a top 4 defenseman for a team? That's where he ended last season for the Penguins. He didn't look great, but he certainly didn't look completely out of place. Is he a depth-only piece that the Penguins used him as such throughout the majority of the season? Heck, he was a healthy scratch for large portions of this season. What is P.O. Joseph? And beyond that, he's a restricted free agent. That's the only thing we know that he is. He's a restricted free agent in need of a new contract. Do the Penguins give him a new deal? Do the Penguins let him walk in free agency? Do they extend a qualifying offer to him? What is the future of P.O. Joseph? It's unknown. Same goes for John Ludwig. He had his injury issues. He only played 33 games this season, most of it because of injuries. He had off-season surgery, and he might miss the beginning of next season. So huge questions as far as the health of John Ludwig. And then there's the play. Yeah, he endeared himself to the fan base, and he was great. But at the same time, there are some major question marks as to his ability in the defensive side of the puck. He's still rough. He's still raw. He still needs to grow on that side of the puck. And that leaves an opening for younger players to potentially take his spot, especially early next season when he's going to be battling back from that injury. The only other 2 defensemen besides Pickering that are signed currently to the Penguins organization, Isaac Beliveau, who spent 70 of his 72 games this season at the East Coast Hockey League level at the ECHL with the Wheeling Nailers, and then Emil Pienaniemi, who spent all of this season in Liga over in Finland. Further off than Owen Pickering, and probably lower on the totem pole than Owen Pickering when the organization looks at it. So at the end of the day, you look at it and you say, there will be a spot for Pickering soon in Pittsburgh. Maybe not as early as the beginning of next season, but perhaps by the end of next season, there's a spot for Owen Pickering in Pittsburgh. But will the Penguins want to put him in that spot at that moment? That's the biggest question. I would think they'd move him to pro hockey next year. I'm not sure what else he has to prove at the WHL level, at the CHL level, at the junior level. He's led his team in defensive scoring for 3 straight seasons. He's captained that team for 2 consecutive seasons. He made it back to the playoffs with that team. He looked really good towards the end of that season. I'm not sure what another year in junior does for Owen Pickering. If he gains that weight, especially over this summer, I don't see any reason that he shouldn't start next year at the American Hockey League level, particularly because of this youth movement that we've talked about with Kyle Dubas. He's starting it in Wilkes-Barre. Yeah, there's going to be players that get opportunities to make the team directly out of camp. I don't foresee Owen Pickering being one of them, but other players like Vili Koivunen, Vasily Podomarev, Braden Yeager should get a shot. Maybe Tristan Brose gets a shot, but the majority of them, excluding Yeager, if they don't impress enough to make an NHL roster spot out of camp, they're going to be going to the AHL level. A lot of the top prospects for the Penguins are going to be playing at the AHL level to begin next season. Throwing Pickering down there allows him to mold with some of these young guys that you hope become the next 2016 AHL Penguins, where they have a lot of success together. They're a young team, and they can be counted upon by the NHL club later as the season goes on to be call-ups late in the season, to be call-ups throughout the season, to start making an impact one by one at the National Hockey League level. To me, that seems to be, and again, the two qualifiers being that he's able to put on weight similar to what he did last offseason. And if he put on 14 last offseason while dealing with an injury, I don't see why he couldn't replicate that entering the offseason healthy, especially considering his frame. He's 6'5". As Scott Wheeler put, there's plenty of room to grow. Again, I encourage you, if you have The Athletic, to go read that article. It came out in March. Very interesting piece on Owen Pickering. But if he can do those things, stay healthy and increase that weight, increase that mass, be around that 200-pound mark, I don't see any reason why he can't play pro hockey as early as next season. Pickering has been somewhat of a forgotten piece because of Braden Yeager's success. And not to take anything away from Braden Yeager, WHL champion, certainly the number one prospect in the Penguin system. This summer is an opportunity for Pickering. It's an opportunity for him to make his name known a little bit more in Pittsburgh. It's an opportunity to break into the spotlight a little bit more within the Penguins organization. They don't have a lot of defensive prospects. He's the guy for the Penguins on defense. It's time he starts to show it. He's been great at the WHL level. I think it's time for him to turn pro if he can do those two things. But that's the decision that Kyle Dubas, Jason Spezza, and whoever they hire at the American Hockey League as their head coach has to face coming up later in this offseason. And it's going to be a big decision. Do you bring your top and really only defensive prospect into the pros next year and let him sink or swim at the American Hockey League level, or do you send him back to the WHL for a little bit more seasoning? It's an interesting one. It's one that is going to be one of the top questions that I look to see answered in training camp next year. There's going to be a lot of circumstances. There's going to be a lot of questions that need answered at training camp this fall. Owen Pickering's future, that's one that I have circled as the top 5 on my list. I want to see what they do with him, but that's a huge question mark, and I'm interested to see how he handles it this summer. He's had a couple of trying summers since he's been drafted by the Penguins, like I mentioned with those injuries. We'll see what he's able to do this one, and I'm very excited to see what kind of shape he shows up to camp in and what he looks like if they end up going back to Buffalo for rookie development camp. I think that would be certainly one of the most entertaining aspects of the early portion of next season. But that's going to do it for this episode of Ice-Burgh To Go. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And remember, you can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.